You mentioned the house system, and I think that's something that if a parent would research a bit about your school, that would pop up rather easily. So we do know that the students are broken up into houses, which, pardon the comparison, it's very Harry Potter-like. But perhaps you can explain to us how that works and how does it benefit kids? Welcome to International School Times Global. We're here with Mike Spencer, founding headmaster of Malvern College. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. First, I'd like to know a bit about you and your journey here to Japan. Also, what made you want to start this mission on starting a new school here in Tokyo?
Yeah, well, thank you. I guess the answer to that question's potentially quite long. I guess I started in international education back in 1995. I graduated from the UK and I worked in a couple of schools in the UK, but it had always been an aspiration to work and teach overseas. And I think that aspiration came probably from the fact that my father was pretty mobile as a naval officer, and we spent some time living in Africa when I was young. And I think it sowed the travel bug. And so I guess as soon as I could really, my wife and I relocated from the UK. My first teaching job overseas was in Hong Kong, where I stayed for 13 years. And one of my daughters was made in Hong Kong.
Okay.
And
that was what year?
that was in 90, she was born in 98.
98, okay.
Yes, absolutely. So it was a great time for us, and we stayed in Hong Kong for about 13 years and worked in a couple of schools there. A great place for children to grow up. So, but we didn't want that to be all that our daughters has experienced. So we then headed off to New Delhi, which was certainly a big change from Hong Kong. And I was fortunate enough there to join the British school in New Delhi as the head of primary. And stayed there for 4 or 5 years. It's a wonderful experience. But then moved back to Shanghai to an international Chinese school, which was bilingual, and worked there for 4.5 years. That was a fascinating experience. So the Hong Kong piece, the Shanghai piece, I've always had an affinity for this sort of area, I suppose, of the world. But then after that, went off to Mozambique from Shanghai.
Mozambique?
Mozambique
Oh, wow.
in sub-Saharan Africa to help start up a school or establish a school there for the Aga Khan Development Network. Very different catchment, as you can imagine.
I can imagine.
But it was a startup. We were there during COVID, and as a result of that, really, it was a residential school, and a residential school during COVID was pretty tough, to be honest. But we decided then, as a family, to come back to the UK, take a few months off, and just recalibrate and think about what we wanted to do. And with that Southeast Asian experience, Shanghai, Hong Kong, the experience of a startup, it was when the opportunity to start up a school like Malvern College came up in a region that I was familiar with some startup experience. All the stars seemed to align, and it seemed like a wonderful opportunity. And it's been a really exciting project, and one that I'm very proud of, and very proud to have been part of, actually. So I arrived in Japan in 2022. That's right, 2022. And for a year before the school opened, we were based in an office out in Shinjuku. And I think I'm employee 0001. But there were other people on board at a similar time. Yeah.
Well, that's so, if my math is correct, that makes 35 years international teaching?
About 29. I left in 95.
Okay,
so yeah, but it's been a long and very fascinating journey, and you know, to bring up your own family in all of those different places as you know, I think the biggest sacrifice you make is family. You know, your parents and your wider family and the cousins and things like that. But I think the opportunities we've had as quite a small family to travel around the world has just been fantastic, and I think internationally mobile families always have fantastic experiences, and we've certainly had that.
And once again, you find yourself again in a startup situation.
Yes.
I think I can count on my hands the number of international schools in the last 20, 30 years that have started in the Tokyo area, so this is quite a feat. Also, some of the schools that I have seen start up, they tend to start with maybe grade 1, grade 2, but not you. You chose to not just start with the entire primary school, but you even started with some of your secondary as well. What was the thinking about such an ambitious goal?
Yeah, well, you know, certainly we wanted to make sure that we didn't open up for the full age range, because obviously we want to make sure that our oldest students have a good runway to pre-university education. But you will be familiar with the campus. It's an immense campus, and if we started a year group at a time, it would take a very long time for us to be able to maximize the use of these wonderful facilities. But yeah, we felt that we wanted to open the PYP, the International Baccalaureate PYP program, and in order to do that, we wanted to put a unit of inquiry and program of inquiry together that covered the full 6 years. We also wanted to start our secondary school so that we could have some subject specialists on the staff very early, working with just 3-year groups, but that's really given them the opportunity to build a curriculum plan and a curriculum framework. So now we're always ready when a new year arrives with the curriculum that we need to be in place. So I think the language elements is also something that's important. Many of our pupils have come to us with varying levels of English language, and at the end of our IB program, which will be taught in English, it's really important that they've had the time to acclimatize to learn the language at a level that will ensure success. So yeah, it's worked well for us.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I think if I speak to many headmasters or principals in different international schools, what I often hear is the challenges of bringing international school kids within a school, especially here in Japan, where English would be their secondary language, and sometimes even third.
Yes.
And so what does Malvern do or aspire to do to bring these children into a school, English-based school, and be part of a global community?
That's a really good question, and it's the language question vexes many international schools wherever they happen to be. But we have a very strong EAL department. We support English as an additional language. We have specialist teachers. Our admissions process, we're very, very keen to make sure that we don't accept students for whom we can't make provision. So I guess we assess levels of English on entry and ensure that the resources are there to serve the needs of those pupils. I would say that for us, we're it's a really interesting mix. We are an international school, but we're certainly very much a British independent school too. So that mixing of British tradition and culture alongside the host culture and the host language is really important, that we value and recognize both of those elements. We have a strong Japanese department. We make sure that our Japanese pupils have the opportunity, and in fact all of our pupils have the opportunity to learn the local language here. And they'll have 4 or 5 lessons a week to maintain and perhaps extend the Japanese language. But we don't claim to be a bilingual school. For us, it's really important that we secure really high levels of English. And we know, a lot of research tells us that it's pretty easy to pick up basic communication skills in the language in a couple of years. But for those students who we want to excel and have a language level that will enable them to succeed at university, you have to allow probably 4 or 5 years for that to happen.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons that we haven't filled up quickly, because we want to make sure that all of our pupils have developed that level of language that will enable them to be successful as they graduate from us from the diploma program and move on to universities.
I can only imagine that the first year of operation, the admissions process was very challenging. So I think, why don't you tell us a bit about what does a Malvern student, what are you looking forward for a Malvern student? Like, what would make them successful for entry?
Yeah, I think it depends on their age. So we have different criteria and assessment protocols for different age of students. Obviously, a pupil who arrives fairly late has a shorter runway to learn the language, so our expectations of their English language skills would probably be a bit higher. But for our younger pupils, for our very young pupils, when they're 4 and 5 years old, it's always very, very difficult to make a prediction as to where they'll be in another 10 years. However, we're pretty experienced at engaging young pupils in very social situations when we assess them, because we want to see it's not just academically how well they do, but we want to know that they can work with others, that they're sociable, that they enjoy playing, that they're confident, that they're willing to take a risk, but without a doubt, when we opened, finding the pupils that we currently have was challenging. You're quite right, particularly as we didn't have any teachers on board at that time. So we were able to, with your help, Ivan, I know, be able to look around and find people who could come and help us do that. And our very first cohort of primary pupils, we're delighted with, actually. I think we've done something right along the way. For older pupils, we do some cognitive ability testing. So if they don't have high English skills, we're still able to determine that they're bright and that they're very capable of learning quickly. So there are non-verbal reasoning elements to our assessments. We want to find out how good pupils are spatially. And so we do a sort of a suite of tests that enable us to assess the potential of pupils as well as see what they're like actually at the point of entry.
I see. Thank you. And you hinted a little bit about Malvern's culture and roots and history. One of the things is you look around Japan, all the international schools, they all have their unique characteristics, something that makes them stand out. But it's taken them years to build that. Malvern is in a unique place where they come in already with this history and this culture. What would you describe would be the characteristics of a typical Malvern school, and how would you say it would stand out among other international schools?
That's a great question, because establishing a brand new school based on the culture and ethos of sister schools in different locations is interesting. I would say that for us, we've been able to draw upon our family of schools very, very closely. Malvern College UK, which was established in 1865 and it's going strong and is a very, very successful independent school in the UK, is the source of much of our culture and vision and mission statements. And those vision and mission statements have spread across all of our 9 campuses. So the wonderful thing about being the newest school is that we have 8 others that we can draw upon, and the expertise and the staff and the startup. The startup phase has been gone through many times. For me, Malvern College is really unique in that it doesn't matter which one you go into, there are some very common features. I think the family feel of our schools is something that we work very hard to instill. We want to make sure that our pupils feel that this is a home from home. And the original Malvern College is a boarding school, so they have the responsibility to look after their pupils for 24 hours a day. And as a result of that, have established some really strong pastoral systems. And we've been able, even though we're a day school, to draw on some of those best practices by introducing things like house systems, and certain staff have responsibilities for making sure that we know our pupils really well and that they're happy and that they're content. And we take the non-academic side of pupil life really seriously, and I think that that's not always the case with day schools. I would say that there are some unique features of all of our schools. Entrepreneurship is something that we're really keen to develop. Sometimes people ask, what is entrepreneurship? It's not simply just about business and money and finance, but I would say it's about encouraging our pupils to be able to add value to their communities, being able to add value to any situation that they might be in. And there's a whole set of skills associated with that, which we deliberately embed in our curriculum. And you know, whilst we have very strong academic results, they're easy to measure. I think what Malvern challenges itself with, and does so successfully, is looking at all of those areas that aren't assessed in a school. You know, how do you assess a pupil's confidence, or their resilience, or their bravery, or their courage? And we have a series of Malvern qualities that we actively consider whenever we prepare a unit of work or our curriculum, because actually it's all of those qualities that are going to make a pupil successful. Academically, yes, they need to cross the line in terms of academic results, but we're not just educating our pupils to do well in their exams. We want the legacy of a Malvern College education to serve them well in their future lives. And I think that we've been able to demonstrate that that's been successful over the decades and almost centuries that Malvern College has been going, and our legacy of Nobel Prize winners and very well-known characters, particularly in the UK, is a testament to how important those values and characteristics are.
You mentioned the house system, and I think that's something that if a parent would research a bit about your school, that would pop up rather easily. So we do know that the students are broken up into houses, which, pardon the comparison, it's very Harry Potter-like. But perhaps you can explain to us how that works and how does it benefit kids?
Yes, the house system is an integral part of all of the Malvern colleges, actually, and you're absolutely right. Every pupil and every teacher, and in fact every staff member, with the exception of the headmaster, belongs to a house. And the wonderful thing about that is that every house has within it pupils from age 5, currently up to age 15, and we have 6 houses. Our pupils dine in their houses at lunchtimes. And so there are mixed age groups and groups of teachers who develop a really, really strong bond throughout their time. And they will stay in that same house for the number of years that they happen to be with us. It could be for 13 years. Pupils are associated with that group. And it enables us to do some wonderful things. I mean, first of all, it enables really strong tutoring. It enables pupils who have a need for academic support to turn not just to teachers in their year group, but to turn to other pupils. It enables us to compete sometimes across our houses in sports or arts. And it really is a way of ensuring that while we may have aspirations to grow to 1,000 pupils, our pupils are always part of a smaller community which feels like a family and which is really supportive. So, yeah, it's taken a while to build and establish those houses, but there's no doubt about it that there's a real pride from the students about the houses that they belong to. And interestingly, the naming of those houses is fascinating. Originally, Malvern College was a boys' school, and so if you look at the history of Malvern College and you look at the alumni, it wasn't till '92 when we became co-educational that you started to see girls represented more fully. And now I'm delighted to say that some of our houses are named after, famous women role models. And we've chosen Junko Tabe. So Tabe is one of our houses, and obviously, the first woman to conquer Everest came from Japan. And so it seems very fitting that in this context we're adapting our traditions to suit our context, and we try to do that all the time. But the house system is certainly something that's embedded well, and I would say that there are many, many opportunities for us to use this particular system for pastoral, academic, and holistic reasons.
When I talk to Malvern College administrators, or sometimes yourself as well, I often hear the term pastoral care. Can you tell me a bit about what that term means for you? What does it mean for the school?
Yes. So fundamentally, unless a child is happy, they're not going to be really switched on to their learning. So for us, the social and emotional development of our pupils is just as important as their academic development. And so when we talk about pastoral care, we're looking for ways to really look after the well-being of our pupils. And that may be through a number of routes, actually. I'll just divert a little, if you don't mind, and talk a bit about COVID. I mean, during COVID, many of our pupils were quite isolated. They were working from home, and it meant that they didn't have the opportunity to develop those social skills of interaction. And when they were in school, they would very often be wearing a mask. And our youngest learners pick up on those facial cues. And with everybody's faces covered, a lot of those skills were very difficult to acquire. And what we notice now, actually, a couple of years after COVID, is that there are some year groups that were more affected by that than others. But through our pastoral care system, what we've been able to do is to look at the social skills, or the shortfall in some of those interpersonal and social skills, and try and build in activities for our pupils as part of the curriculum that help plug that gap. So I guess pastoral care is making sure that pupils' well-being is secure enough for learning to be their main focus.
I like the fact that you brought COVID up, because I find a lot of schools were really tested during that time. Their infrastructure, the way that their system was built, but also the recovery process. I visited some public schools in New York, and there was a campaign to try to get kids to remove their masks well after the epidemic, because there was this fear, and they decided kids felt secure with it on, and they began hiding behind it. There was no system in place to really address them and see what they were hiding from, because they were no longer hiding from COVID. But it was still a tool for them to do that. It's great to see that there's a school like yours that does take that time and that effort to really care for kids, especially in the recovery process, because it doesn't have to be COVID. I was here for the big earthquake on March 11th, and that was also quite traumatizing for kids as well. It takes a community to really build kids back.
It does. One of the legacies as well has been, something that we've just introduced as we've opened for our second year. I mean, we had about 150 students for our first year's cohort, and we're now approximately 300 for our second year. But when you open the doors for 150 new students, that's quite a challenge. I mean, there's opening the doors for the first time, and then there's opening the doors for the second time. And one thing that we thought long and hard about as a staff was about screen time and about the amount of time that our pupils spend just looking at their iPads or their computers. So what we felt would be a really good thing to do in order to encourage real interaction with our new pupils arriving was to say in public spaces, no screens. At the beginning of the school day, no screens. And I thought this was going to be a real challenge for us. But what are the pupils doing now? They are genuinely interacting. So when they arrive in the morning, they don't just get their iPad out of their bag and do their homework, but we've got a number of things that they can do in the mornings, and they're now interacting, creating games. And I would say that the integration of our new pupils as a result of that has just been, I'd say, almost seamless. I never anticipated that a change as small as that would have such far-reaching consequences. And now, screens aren't the first thing that a pupil reaches for. I think that's a legacy of COVID too, and for teachers, sometimes reminding them to put the lid down.
That's right.
And, it's important.
Parents as well.
Yes.
We have a no screen time at the dinner table, because it's basically the difference between having a conversation and not having one, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You mentioned several times that this is a UK school with roots deep in the English and British system. One of the things that I see is you have a beautiful facility here, beautiful grounds. You're developing your secondary school, eventually having graduates at some point. I'm sure you're probably thinking about sports. When I think of British sports, I think of football, rugby, maybe even cricket.
Yes.
Is there any particular sport that you see the school gravitating towards, or that the school's trying to develop?
Yes, there are certainly a couple, and you've rightly mentioned rugby. I mean, Japan hosted the World Cup not long ago, and there's a real love of that game here in Japan. We actually have a member of our PE team who's a former international rugby player, and so
is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So it's certainly an area we have aspirations to develop. So rugby definitely, and what comes with rugby is of all the team games, it's arguably the one that you need to rely on your teammates more than in any other sport. It's the only sport where you have to pass the ball backwards.
That's right.
So in order to go forwards, you can't do that entirely on your own. You have to make sure that you use your team. The other thing that's really fascinating, and I was really surprised to hear this, I was in touch with the Japan Cricket Association recently, and I couldn't believe how many cricket teams there are in Japan. So yeah, I don't know the exact numbers, but I was really shocked and surprised to hear. and there are lots of girls and women's cricket teams. That's certainly something that we'd like to develop and encourage here, because it's quite a niche sport, but I think it gives access to really competitive levels of sport in a geography that you would never expect that to be the case. So, yeah, cricket, rugby, football or soccer. We prefer football.
I was very careful.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
Soccer.
no, that's great. So football is something the world over that is popular, and our pupils love it too. Basketball is proving really, really popular. We've got wonderful facilities here, actually. We've got an AstroTurf a bit further down the lane, which used to be a series of tennis courts, but that's now been converted into a pitch that we use for all sorts of things. We play mini rugby, and we invite other schools to come and play sports with us there. We have a very large sports hall, known in Malvern terminology as Big School, which also has a stage, but it's so large we can section it off into 2 or 3 different basketball courts, and that's proved to be our most popular after-school activity. But we run about 30 after-school activities. That's another thing I would say that's very important and unique about Malvern, is that we appreciate that learning doesn't just happen in the classroom, and that passion to do things outside the classroom we want to encourage. Sport is obviously one of them, but we run about 30 to 35 activities currently after school that our pupils can benefit from, and so we're really proud of that wide offering, and we can only see that increasing. And we're really trying to encourage some of our older pupils to lead things that they have a passion for. And some of our pupils are extraordinarily talented, whether they be filmmakers or musicians or horse riders. But, we really try to ensure that they have the opportunity to sow the seeds of their passions. And that happens through our... We also want to maintain our, we know we're in Tokyo, so we run some, traditional Japanese, sports, Aikido and Judo. We sometimes get people from outside to come and maintain those, more traditional Japanese sports. But yeah, our aim is to, we don't have a swimming pool. That's something that but we do have a swimming program that we operate in the local pool area. So I would say, yes, we've got a very young, dynamic PE department who look for many opportunities for inter-house competitions as well as external fixtures with other international schools.
You're a very proud headmaster, but not just proud of your school. It's very heartwarming to hear how proud you are of your kids and the children that come to this school. But perhaps I'm going to ask you to step back from being a headmaster and try to imagine you're a grade 5 boy coming home, and his parents ask him, so what did you do today? How was your day? What would you hope that grade 5 boy would say?
I'd certainly hope they had a lot to say. For us, it's really important that the learning in the classroom is dynamic and interesting and engaging. One of the wonderful things about the IB program is that it is very inquiry-based, and so it feeds off the natural curiosity and interests of the pupils. So I'd really hope that they would talk about things they'd been doing. I'd love them to be talking about the hands-on nature of what we do here. I'd really like them to be talking about the effort that we put into the social and emotional learning, because every one of our teachers, and I'm very proud of our teachers too, the number one recruitment criteria has to be, for me, and has been, how our teachers talk about working with pupils. and every one of them is passionate about making sure that every individual has the opportunity to excel. So I'd love what they talked about to reflect something that's personal to them. And I'd love them to be able to articulate to their parents about how their teachers know and understand them, because that really is something at Malvern that we're proud of, and we hope. I think it depends on the time of year too. Some of our pupils have had the opportunity to leave campus and go on trips. We've already, I've signed off on about 9 off-campus trips, and we're only a month into our term. So I think that's great too. And residential trips and ski trips are planned as well, which in our second year of operation, again, is something that we're really proud about.
Well, Mike, your first year is finished. You just had your 1-year anniversary, I believe, last month.
Yes, we did.
So it's a wonderful anniversary to celebrate, and you've already accomplished so much just looking around and seeing all the kids learning. I love the very wide halls. I was just mentioning that, and just seeing the kids just being comfortable there, reading a book and just chatting with their friends. It's a very welcoming place. Thank you so much for sharing so much about your school.
Yeah.
That was Mike Spencer, founding headmaster of Malvern College. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Ivan. Thank you.